I think a lot of it had to do with the movie On Any Sunday. When it hit the theaters in South Africa, my dad was, I don't know if he was a senior, but either way, he was at the tail end of high school, and he said him and his buddies went to watch it. And when they left, they were like, we got to get into motocross. Like, this is so cool. I remember I was in tears, and my dad's like, what's wrong? And I said, this is your fault. I said, I could be dominating the high school class, but you pushed me up, and now these guys are threatening me, and they're all out to get me. And he told me, he said, go out there. If someone dishes it to you, you hit them twice as hard. And he goes, and I said, yeah, then they're going to try to beat me up. He goes, then after the finish line, after the checkered flag, pull up next to me. I'll handle the rest. And with that little bit of confidence, I started dishing it out. And I think maybe that's why I started to learn, how to be a bit of an asshole on the racetrack. That was probably the biggest learning curve, was going from being kind of the big fish in the small pond of South Africa to being the little guppy in this giant ocean that was called World Grand Prix racing.
Meet the Guest. Next chapter. Part of the Coach Robb Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Meet the Guest, part of the Coach Robb Podcast Network. I am so pleased with our guest today. Who we have, it is an incredible honor and a privilege. Mr. Grant Langston, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Rob?
I am doing great. I love getting a chance to chat with you. I mean, if you're not running the dealership, you're running the sandwich store. If you're not running the sandwich store, you're running the pool guy. If you're not running the pool guy, you're interior designing. You're a man of many, many hats.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they know the business aspect, whether it was racing or what you do. But, I think like most people, once you leave that world, or, come home from work, you're just an average guy, right? You got to do chores. You got to clean up the house. And I got to get my office redone. We got rid of some old furniture, and we got some new stuff that I didn't realize required assembly. So I got a job to do this weekend.
You've got my respect. Michaela can attest. I don't follow directions very well. I don't know what it is. My fuse is so brief when it comes to following,
I'm with
so
you. I hear you on that one.
Mad respect for you in that regards. Well, brother, I can't thank you enough. It's been a while since we got a chance to see each other. You and Ping and I, we kind of did a anti-COVID thing. We got a podcast together. We won't say where we did it, so that way we don't incriminate anybody, but we were able to pull it off. And it's been a few sunsets since I had a chance to see you. In fact, I think the last time we saw each other was a part of that Elevate program. So it has been a few sunsets. So it's good to see you. I can't tell you how excited I am to kind of share with the listeners things that most people don't get a chance to understand. I think 99.9% of the listeners will know that you're from South Africa, but give me a little bit of a background. Being an American, we hear about, Johannesburg being essentially you're going to get kidnapped if you go to Johannesburg. But excuse me, you hear it's an incredibly beautiful place, but you hear it's a dangerous place. How in the world did you get started in motocross? And bring us up to speed.
Well, it's definitely changed over the years. Some of it maybe for the better, but a lot of it definitely for the worse, in my opinion. So crazy, but motocross I would say probably getting into the later 70s and early 80s, motocross was big in South Africa. It was so big at one point, they were bringing the Americans and the Europeans over to do money races. And some of the guys actually ended up staying because they were like, well, in the US, I'm one of 10 really good guys. Here, I'm the guy. So some of the guys that raced back then, Rex Staten spent time over there. Jim Tarantino, who was a SoCal top dog, he ended up meeting a South African girl and got married and started a business over there and has never left. So I think I've said it before, but I think a lot of it had to do with the movie On Any Sunday. When it hit the theaters in South Africa, my dad was, I don't know if he was a senior, but either way, he was at the tail end of high school, and he said him and his buddies went to watch it. And when they left, they were like, we got to get into motocross. Like, this is so cool. And the sport really evolved pretty quickly from just I mean, I remember there were some races, they used to just call it grass track because they would just go to some farmer's property and take candy tape and some stakes and stake out a track and drop the flag. And there really weren't any jumps. It was just you rode and the grass got tore up, and that's how you got some berms or ruts. But then there were more tracks, and obviously then there were the importing side started. So you had manufacturers, like back then, Mako and other brands setting up South African distribution and dealer networks. And so I would say by the mid 80s, I mean, it was pretty big. We also had Camel and Wrangler and all these, big sponsors from the US supporting the series there. And there was decent prize money. There was good sponsorship. All the manufacturers were involved. So at one point, motocross, and it's all relative, right? But, for South Africa, where I've had people go, I didn't even know you guys had dirt bikes there. And I'm like, yeah, we're not that backwards. It's a little more modernized than you think. But it went from being a sport that really evolved quickly and the numbers grew. And then, they were getting at club races, two rows at the starting line. Unfortunately, over time, between import duties and government changing policies, sponsors pulling out, there was a whole host of things. So when I got into motocross in the late 80s, it was at the tail end of the peak, I would say, of when it was big. And unfortunately, I watched it starting to dwindle, even I raced there from 1988 till 97. So 9 years, pretty much amateur, and then into the 125 class before moving to Europe. So I saw the beginning, when I was a kid, and we'd go to the pro races and see all the top guys, and I'd run around getting autographs and asking guys for their jerseys and getting whatever I could, because I just became such an enthusiast. And obviously my dad, from his riding, they say that sometimes the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I think because his friends were into the sport, it was kind of almost an easy fit. But ironically, when my mother got pregnant with me, she told my dad he had to sell his dirt bike and grow up because he's going to be a dad now. And then when they knew they were going to have a boy, they said, my mom told my dad he can do anything but race motocross, because she just thought it was extremely dangerous and extremely expensive. And so they never really pushed me into it. I just, through some of my dad's friends, they have kids, and then one of his buddies got their son a dirt bike. He had crashed it, was scared to ride it. We used to go over there sometimes to watch the rugby on the weekends, and I used to beg. Ironically, his name was Robb as well, and I used to call him Uncle Robb. And I'm like, Uncle Robb, I want to ride that bike. And I kept bugging him, and eventually they took me out, and I got a ride, and I just it was one of my earliest memories, because I was only about 5 years and a few months, but I was hooked. I picked it up very quickly. I don't remember all the details. I just remember thinking that was so awesome. Like, I want a bike. I want to go ride. And then, one thing led to another. And my dad ended up buying that bike from Uncle Robb. And it was nothing special. It was an old QR50 from Honda, which they didn't even bring that to the US, I'm aware. But it was just very simple, kind of like a PW50. But that was the start. And then my dad asked me one day, hey, do you want to try a race? I was like, yeah, and we went to the local club and found out how to join and when the next race was, and went to the first race, and I was terrible. I got lapped twice in the second moto. I stopped. I thought I'd listen at riders meeting, because my dad said, listen, it's your first race. You got to listen. And I remember them saying, if you see the yellow flags, you cannot pass another rider. Well, I took that quite literally and waited for the kids that were on the ground to pick their bikes up and get going before I continued on.
Oh my goodness. That's awesome.
Quite the gentleman.
Yes, absolutely.
And my dad's pulling his hair out going, what are you doing? And, from there, I remember thinking, wow, these guys are good. And I was in the novice class. And, it just, same thing, just started going to the practice track and getting some more experience. And I think I was extremely nervous at the first race. I was very timid. Like I rolled off straight off the start line and everyone went by and I was at the back. And, you know, I think a lot of kids have a bit of a similar experience from their first race, especially if you're not prepared or don't know what you're getting into. But then I felt like the trajectory went pretty quick. And then all of a sudden, I think it was only like 2 races later. I think I finished pretty much second last at the first race. Then I got second or third at the next race, and then I won the next race. And then I moved up, and then I won in the intermediate class, and then moved up. And then within 1 year, I went from beginner to expert and won the last race. So at that point, I think I was kind of almost addicted to winning and the feeling of it, and just love riding. There was never crossed my mind at that age, oh, this could be a career or a profession or get you to America. It was just organic, going out, having fun and enjoying trying to kick everyone's ass. And that's kind of how it started. And then it just kept, escalating, and then got sponsored and started doing nationals and things like that. So pretty cool experience. A little bit different. I feel like nowadays I see these kids, and by age 6, they're going to races in different states. They've got coaches, riding coaches. I feel like there's a lot more knowledge, and they're a lot more prepared even from a young age. Whereas for us, it was a lot of trial and tribulations. But that old saying, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So
That's it.
that's where the strength came from. It was a lot of mistakes.
In that 1 year that you went from novice to pretty much expert, what bike were you riding? Were you in the 85 class, or maybe probably called it 80s then?
I was still on Pee-wees. So basically, after I got beat pretty bad at the first race, my dad told my mom, all the kids were on PW50s. That was the problem. That's the reason he didn't do well. We got to get him a PW50. And, thankfully back then they were very cheap, even South Africa. So I think my dad had to finance it. We didn't have much money, but he convinced my mom that I needed this bike and it was going to solve all the world's problems. And that was the first year, was pretty much just on 50. So I went through the ranks. And then the following year, I won almost every race in the 50 class. And then in South Africa, they had PW80. So that was the next year. And then I went to KX60, and then I went to 80. So I just felt like almost every year I was just moving up. And because by the age of, bear with me, by the age of 9, I was already on 80s, because back then it was 80cc. So pretty quick. I think it was about 3.5 years from learning to ride to racing, the big amateur events in South Africa on 80s. So
what was your first 80? What bike?
Well, actually, through the dealership that my dad bought my first PW50, it was a Yamaha dealership. And the owner just started kind of taking a liking to me and just liked seeing, what I was doing. And he liked me and my dad. So he knew that my dad was struggling financially. And he was a very, very generous guy, very helpful. You sit back and look sometimes and think, man, there were a few key people that helped get me out on the track. And he was one of them. His name was Vernon. His dealership was Perry Yamaha, which was his last name. So he supported me from 1989, 89, 90, 91. And then I got noticed by Honda, which was the big team in South Africa at the time. And he was only too happy to see me get that ride, because he was like, you deserve it. Glad you guys have a good deal.
That's awesome.
With bonus money, travel allowance, all these kinds of things that we really needed. And then I was very competitive, right in the championship mix, early stage, when I went to Honda. And then I had my first big injury when I shattered my femur. As a kid, you don't always think ahead. They watered the track. I washed out going up off a jump, and I was on the blind side. But all I was ever told is if you go down, you get up as quickly as you can. And I was kind of in a bit of a squatting position to pick my bike up, and a guy landed right on my femur and just disintegrated it. And that took me out of racing for about a year.
And how old were you at that time, Garrett?
I just turned 12. And yeah, it was pretty bad. I had to have multiple surgeries, bone graft. In fact, the doctor told my parents that I would never be able to ride again. And I think as a kid, you're strong-willed, but also stubborn. And I was like, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't even know what motocross is. I'm like, I'm going to prove him wrong. And I told my parents, I said, I want to go race. I said, I can feel my leg is fine. It's healed. I just had to work on getting the muscles back and all that because I was in hospital for so long. I mean, literally my leg had completely faded away to nothing. So there was a bit of a building back procedure. And then it was kind of felt like I was just so motivated to get to the top. And then I was able to, unfortunately, through all this process, we didn't really get I don't remember if it just wasn't a good deal, if we didn't get an offer from Honda, but Team Green picked me up in South Africa. And I remember telling the boss, who was also the importer of Kawasaki South Africa, I told him, you're going to be very thankful you made this decision. I said, I'm going to win every race I enter. And I won every race I entered for 2 years with them. And then went to 125s in 97. I skipped the juniors. I did one race in high school. It was a little bit muddy and they shortened the track. But at the first race, I lapped second place. So I went straight to what in South Africa they call 125 senior, which is almost like the pro class. Well, it'd be the equivalent of our pro class.
Okay.
And, there I started getting roughed up, bullied, because I was 14 and you had to actually be 18 to race in that class. So they didn't like this kid, that was, making them look bad.
Sure.
And, so it was a tough year because I dealt with a lot, from guys that threatened me on the start line, to just flat out T-boning me during the race. And it was frustrating, but I remember I was in tears and my dad's like, what's wrong? And I said, this is your fault. I said, I could be dominating the high school class, but you pushed me up and now these guys are threatening me and they're all out to get me. And he told me, he said, go out there. If someone dishes it to you, you hit them twice as hard. And he goes, and I said, yeah, then they're going to try to beat me up. He goes, then after the finish line, after the checkered flag, pull up next to me. I'll handle the rest. And with that little bit of confidence, I started dishing it out. And I think maybe that's why I started to learn, how to be a bit of an asshole on the racetrack. And
props to your dad, though. How cool is that?
Yeah, he's
That's
like,
unbelievable.
don't worry, I got your back. And
yeah. For my 14-year-old son who's banging bars with 18-year-olds.
Yeah. A lot of the guys that were winning were in their early 20s. So there was a big age gap. And and so it was a bit rough for a little while, but I think a lot of those guys got to a certain point where they just were like, okay, he's better than us. And then they kind of backed off, they treated me with respect. In fact, at the end of that year was when I went to Europe, and some of those guys that I thought like hated me and I felt like I hated them ended up becoming some of my biggest supporters and fans as the years went on. So it's funny how racing goes sometimes, but some of those guys that I hated at one point are still some of my best friends today.
It's like getting in a fight on the playground. You go from arch enemies to best friends as soon as you beat the shit out of each other.
Exactly. It's a little like that. Yeah.
I want to go back because most people, if you've not been out and seen Grant's dealership with his parents, one of the most beautiful dealerships I've ever seen. Did Dad have a dealership back in South Africa? I know you said you got the bikes through the Yamaha dealer, but I don't remember you saying that Dad owned the dealership or had one. Okay.
No, never had that kind of money, but
yeah.
No, I mean, I remember we would he would take my bike to the Perry Yamaha and work in their workshop on my bike. And I'm like, why do you have to do it here? He goes, I don't have all the tools. And he goes, when I'm here, I get to use their contact cleaner, their chain lube, their oil. And he goes, which would cost a lot from home. So I hung out in a dealership for many, many, many hours over the years. And I think part of that experience, and then, like I said, my dad would be working on the bike in the back, and I would just be trying to entertain myself. So I'd be hanging out on the showroom floor, being one of those annoying kids, jumping on all the bikes and trying on all the gear and all that. But I do remember when seeing people get a new bike and seeing, when they were excited. I remember when I think it was the R7, but Yamaha came out with their super bike, and Perry Yamaha got one. And I remember seeing the guy who bought it and all the employees. They had to open the big glass sliding doors, and they were all cheering and clapping. And I remember thinking, how cool is this? Like,
Yeah.
and there was something inside me that said, one day I want to own a dealership. Like, I want this to go like full circle. So
Yeah.
that was always something I think was in the back of my mind. Obviously, racing was at the forefront, but it was when I stopped racing, I knew that was something I wanted to be involved in. And I didn't know if there was a way to do it, or start one, buy an existing one, where, who, how. There were a lot of
Sure.
factors, but things have a way of working out, and here we
That's
have
right.
it. And even when we took over what used to be called West Coast Motorsports, it was in '08 when the recession happened. So they were going out of business. And I remember me and my dad and my mom, talking about things, and we ended up buying it. And obviously, I fronted, majority of the money.
Mm-hmm.
I said to my dad the one day, I said, "Are we that arrogant that we think we can just walk in and flip a switch and this thing's going to be profitable?" And he's like, "Well, it's not going to happen overnight." So, we kind of knew we were coming in and we were probably going to have to subsidize for a while, but it worked out. We learned a lot in a short amount of time as well. It's one of those things, you think you know what you're getting into, and then you realize, oh, there's a whole laundry list of things that you didn't anticipate or didn't even know about. But it's been rewarding in many ways. We have a lot of dads that come through the store and they buy from us, and we do some sponsorship programs, and we do discounts for all the races. So it's nice when people come in, and sometimes at the shop I have to hear how little Johnny did on the weekend, and they show me photos, and they're all excited, and it
Yeah.
takes me back thinking that was us,
Yeah.
30 years ago.
When that door opened up at that dealership, was it was it yellow and red Kenny Roberts? Was it white and red? What color was the street bike?
It was the white and red. Yeah,
White and red. Yeah. Oh
all red.
man. I'm actually in the market trying to find an RZ 350 yellow and black. The old Kenny Roberts is what I'm trying to find right now.
What a beautiful bike. We do a
Little two stroke.
we do a vintage bike show at the dealership every year, and there's a guy that's what he specializes in, collecting the old road race bikes, and he's got the red and white and the black and yellow, and they just sound so beautiful. They just have a certain little
Yep.
zing in them that cannot be replicated.
It's like your first love, you never forget it. I remember when I was in high school, a pretty wealthy kid got one, and just like you said, just he'd roll away from the school, and he was a good rider, meaning that he didn't just like ring it out. He'd run it up to about 4,000 and just get kind of into the meat of it just before it starts to hit red line. Well, it's far from red line, as you know, but it just
Yeah.
sounded so sweet. And that two-stroke oil in the air on a street bike, I'm like, oh, most people didn't get it, because with us mixing our two-stroke oil for our dirt bikes, I'm like, that's a street bike that smells really good
Yes.
and
Yep.
sounds so good.
Yeah. Thing of beauty.
You mentioned leaving South Africa, and I'm going to confess here, I had forgotten about the journey of going to Europe. I'm like probably most of the listeners. I've got you entrenched over here riding for Yamaha and doing what you did so well over here. How old were you when you went over to Europe? And You've mentioned it twice, so I hope I don't say anything that's offensive. And if I do, you can punch me in the throat the next time you see me. Obviously, money's a little bit of an issue. Dad's working on the bike at the dealership. He's, showing you how to be frugal, how to appreciate a dollar, but still trying to get you to the races. You obviously are naturally talented, had that fire in the belly, had your first incredible injury at that age, having your leg decimated and putting it back together, rebuilding the muscle. You get this opportunity to go overseas. Who was it with? Was it Honda, Cowie? Who took you?
If I can just back it up a little bit,
Yeah, please. Yeah, wherever you want.
E95, thanks to Kawasaki, South Africa, they helped orchestrate a trip for me to go to, well, it was Ireland, but the reason that relationship happened was it was, and I don't know the exact details, but it was the British importer for Kawasaki that used to then route shipments to South Africa, is the way I put it. So it's basically Kawasaki South Africa had a good relationship with the British. And so basically Kawasaki Great Britain said, yeah, we'll provide a bike, transportation, everything he needs. And then Kawasaki South Africa paid for me and my dad's flights. So we were able to go, and I was able to race in Northern Ireland at one of the rounds of the British Schoolboy Championship, which is their.
And how old were you, Grant? Excuse me. How old were you?
13.
Wow. Ripe age at 13 years old, and you're leaving South Africa.
I think I just turned 13. I may have still been 12 because I remember my birthday is middle of June. So I'm always one age to start and finish off the year a different age. But around that time, but I think I just turned 13. So this was the first time leaving South Africa, and in the back of my mind, I'm going, I know the Europeans and the Americans are really good at motocross. So I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous, scared. And then when we got there, I was like, holy crap, like this is huge. They were rigs and big motorhomes. And I'm thinking it's a little bit different to South Africa with pickup trucks and trailers.
And this is 3 years after you learned to ride a P-dub, essentially. 3 years later.
In 3 years, but yeah, it felt like it had escalated pretty quickly.
Because that's right. I was thinking 9 to 12. Yeah, 9 is when you started getting serious with the racing. And my goodness, next thing you know, you're on a flight to Great Britain or to Ireland, excuse me.
Yeah, so we went over there. Like I said, I was very, very nervous. But then when we got there and I saw the track, Desert Martin, if anyone's seen it, they've had many GPs there. It's a little bit like the Sandy Loom.
Okay. And you're going to love this. You're going to love this, Grant.
What?
The owner of that track is Richard McEwen, and his dad. Yeah. They own Desert Martin, and he's one of our CRS certified coaches in Ireland.
So I became friends with the McEwen family from that. And we stayed many, many years. In fact, I was racing in Europe. They would always come to either the British GP or somewhere on the European continent. So yeah, the McEwens are very, very nice people. I remember we got there, they made an effort to come and welcome us, show us around, tell us we need anything. In fact, they took us, we went to go see some of the sites like castles and Giant Causeway and all these cool sightseeing things. And a lot of it was because of people like them. So I had a wonderful trip. And then when I saw the track, I got excited because I'm like, this reminds me of one of our home tracks. And I was really good at that track at home. So I thought, if ever was going to be a track that suited me, this could be one of them. And it was cool because I went out and pretty much dominated the race and took a lot of people by surprise.
On the 125 at this point?
No, this was 80s. So
on 80s. Okay, excuse me.
That's why I said I'm going to back it up a little bit.
No, that's great. Thank you for doing that.
So I was on KX80, won all the motos. And I definitely think it got some people's heads turned because it was almost like, who is this guy? And where's he from? And, like, where did he come from? What's he doing? Went back home, continued to win everything. Then in 1996, I had an opportunity to come race in America. And because a lot of people ask, oh, did you ever do Loretta's? I said, no, because with Loretta's, we would have had to flown over to do a qualifier.
Mhm.
go home, and then come back to do Loretta's. So at that time, from the research my dad had done was, he said the biggest race that you don't have to pre-qualify for is the World Minis in Vegas.
Ponca. Oh, at Vegas, not
Yeah,
Ponca. Okay.
I think Ponca and World Minis were about on par.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and I don't know. I think the reason we chose Vegas was just because of the way our racing schedule in South Africa worked. That was the only big race that we could do in amateurs in America. So
Okay.
came over. Funny enough, in '95, the year before, Pastrana came to South Africa to race on 80s, and we had a battle back then for the win. He had an injured thumb and re-aggravated it, so I ended up winning. But he showed me what speed was, because I remember thinking, dude, this guy's fast. I was hanging it out to stay with him, and we had a good battle. The one motor, we went back and forth, back and forth. So when I came to America in '96, I'm walking around the pits going, wow, there's a lot of people here. And the only person I knew was Travis Pastrana.
Not a bad guy to know.
No, and he was so just cool, friendly, almost like, we were competitors, but it treated me like I was a good buddy of his, and he
Good
still,
old Travis.
he bought me a snow cone. I didn't even know what those were, but it was hot in Vegas. And he's like, I'm going to get you a snow cone. If you come to America, you have to have a snow cone. And I was like, all right. And all of a sudden I was hooked on snow cones.
Right. Yeah,
but
exactly.
at that event, I raced 80s and super mini, but I only had a 80cc bike. So in the
And
super,
were you under the Team Green umbrella
yeah,
being here at Ponca or
uh,
World Minis?
no, actually, the person that kind of helped us out was Hilton Beatty, who was a fellow South African. My dad and him used to race together, and he
Okay.
was running FMF's amateur program.
No way.
So
What a
here I
small
am
little world.
on a pro circuit Kawasaki under the FMF truck, because we didn't have a pressure washer, we didn't have tools, like we were
Sure.
pretty much just winging it. Um, so I won my qualifiers. I went down in the main event trying to pass Johnny Marley for the win, and I ended up third. And then the super mini, I think I got just like fifth or just outside the top five. But again, I was on an 80, so I was definitely a little bit down on power and things like that. But it was good to battle with Pastrana and Buckaloo and Jonathan Shimp, Sean Hamlin. There were a lot of fast guys then. So then in '97, I moved up to the 125s in South Africa, and we had an opportunity to go and do a European championship. So in Europe, the European Championship is the stepping stone to the Grand Prix. Like that's usually where you go and show yourself to get a GP ride.
On a 125 at this point, or still on an 85?
125, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So first year on 125s, and
Still on Team Green?
no, ended up going back to Honda,
Okay.
because I asked my dad why we switched, and he said, it's purely about the money. And he basically said the Honda
Trying
deal
to pay.
was really good.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was one of the first time in many, many years a rider had actually been paid a salary. I never saw the salary. It went straight into racing.
Sure.
Level,
Sure.
but it enabled us to go racing.
And how old were you with this new Honda deal?
14.
I appreciate you letting me interrupt you. Just people understanding a 9 to a 12-year-old, a 12 to a 14-year-old. It's like you say, the learning curve is vertical.
Yeah. And I'd gone through growth spurts and all kinds of things. So the body was changing, and we didn't have the tools like you can provide for your clients now. I would have dreamed to have had someone like you helping me along the way, because it was very, very green the way we did it. It was, I almost feel like saying, because we were so oblivious to reality, it might have been a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yep.
sometimes when you know what you're getting into, it makes you rethink things. But so in '97, that was the year I said I skipped schoolboy and went straight to the senior class, got roughed up. But then I started, I think the second half of the season, I think I won every race except one, which
And
I
this
won
is in Europe.
South Africa.
Okay, back in South
So
Africa. Okay.
basically what happened was, between my dad and one of our sponsors at Honda from Castrol, It was Castrol Honda. So
Okay.
I from Castrol said, hey, if you can dominate the remaining part of the season, or win out, I will personally make sure that we pay for you to go to Europe. And I was able to do that. I didn't win one moto, but that wasn't my fault. It was mechanical. But I was leading when it happened, so I would have won all the motos. So it was very cool to then have that opportunity. And right after the last national, we went to Italy to race in Asti at I think it was the final European Championship race. And
Now, Grant, would that be the equivalent of like the MX3 class today in the 125s?
I'm not too sure. No, because I think MX3 is. I might be wrong. They may have changed it, but MX3 became like the 500. The when I went away from 500, it was MX3.
Gotcha.
But at some of the GPs, they have the 125 schoolboy class at the actual race itself. So the European Championship didn't run at the same event as a GP,
Okay.
with its own series. And I remember on Saturday when they have qualifying, I ended up qualifying second. And
behind somebody we know.
I think the fastest guy was Thomas Traversini. He ended up winning a few GPs, but never, went on to be a world champion. But he was teammates with Chiodi when Chiodi was winning at Husqvarna. But a very fast amateur guy. Eric Sorby was there that day.
Nice.
Steve Boniface, Matthew Laloz. I'm trying to think who people might remember that also came to America, but qualified second. I remember I was really stoked because in first practice, I think I was like 18th fastest or something.
Wow.
And my dad, as he would say, threw his toys out of the cart and had a just reaming me. We didn't travel halfway around the world for you to ride like a freaking asshole. And I'm just like, I'm nervous. It's a new track. They had these big hills, and I wasn't.
And you're how old at this point?
15.
15. You're so mature at 15.
Yeah. Was I? Yes, I was 15. Yeah. So then, unfortunately, it rained on Sunday, and the track was that hard pack slick, and I just couldn't stay off the ground. So I didn't have the race I wanted. I remember feeling like I left there very down on myself, like thinking I had this one chance, and I blew it. But thankfully, I didn't actually blow it. I was able to get some recognized by some key people, and one of them was Harry Everts, father of Stefan.
That's not too bad to get recognized by someone like that.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, within a matter of I don't know, a month, maybe 2 months max, it went from we weren't sure what we're doing in 98 to we were signing a contract through the fax machine to go to Europe and go.
For how many years was the contract worth?
1 year.
Okay.
1 year, no salary. They just provided transportation, accommodation, and then there wasn't even a bonus program from them. It was just money that you'd get from the race winnings or smaller events. So that was probably the biggest learning curve, was going from being kind of the big fish in the small pond of South Africa to being the little guppy in this giant ocean that was called World Grand Prix racing. Just from the culture, the difference in tracks, every country, the tracks are different. They're prepped by different people. I'd never seen uphills and downhills like that in my life. Belgium, the sand, and Holland, like such deep sand. I felt like a beginner. I couldn't even get around the track. And then the weather, rained a lot, especially in the winter months, a lot of mud, not my expertise. I come from sunny South Africa. So I really started struggling in the beginning, one riding, but mainly just being really homesick. And that was really tough. And then
is mom still back in South Africa, and it's just you and dad doing this?
Yeah, we're my sister's in school, so the family's split at the moment.
Yeah.
We're broke. We don't have any friends. I don't have any. I didn't even have a computer, a cell phone, a
Mm-hmm.
bicycle. Like I had nothing.
Sure.
So it was definitely really tough. Like I said, I struggled personally and professionally at that point, and I didn't even qualify for the first two GPs, and it was demoralizing. I think that's the only way I could put it. It was really, really demoralizing, and I know one of the questions you said you wanted to ask me was, what was one of those low moments that
Mm-hmm.
turned out to be a blessing? And I remember it was Foxhills, the English Grand Prix, and I didn't qualify. And I was sitting on the bank watching the race, and the commentators getting the crowd pumped up for the race, and I had this wave of emotions, and I just started crying. Like
Mm.
I was like, I should be out there, and I'm not. Like this sucks. Like it was even a little embarrassing. It felt and
Sure.
my dad's not happy with me, and things just aren't going well. Like I'm not in a good place, and
At the ripe age of 15, have the weight of
yeah.
the world on your shoulders,
And I remember
literally.
Harry Everts walked up to me from behind. I didn't see him, and he just sat down next to me on the bank, and he like looked at me, and he kind of put his arm around me, like, "Hey, it's gonna be okay." And I'm like, "I can't even qualify." And he just looked at me, and he had a little smirk, and he said, in his broken English, he said, "Don't worry, Yonga." He goes, "I believe in you." He goes, "You one day, I believe you'll be a world champion." And I was like, "This guy's just trying to be nice." Like I didn't believe him when he said that. I thought he
Mm.
literally trying to make me feel better.
Sure.
I laughed. I said, "Harry, I'm not even on the gate because I'm not in the Faust 40." I'm like, "How in the world am I going to become a world champion if I can't even qualify?" And he said, "You're young. You'll figure it out. We'll work on things. You'll get there." And I didn't
Wow.
take it that seriously at the time because I didn't believe him. If he believed it, he was the only one in that conversation that did, because I didn't. I had resorted to the fact that I wasn't as good as I thought I was.
Mm.
Um, and then for whatever reason, he just tried really hard to kind of like nurture me, and just maybe things that he knew or took for granted or assumed I knew. He took me through all these baby steps, and he said, "Okay, there's no point doing 45-minute motos if you can't qualify." He goes, let's work on sprints. Let's work on sections, break it down." And I think Ricky Carmichael's mother was a little bit the same way. Multiple stopwatches, and everything was, you could do it faster, you can do it faster.
Yeah.
Just started breaking tracks down into sections, and then we would fix that section, then that section, then put it together. And yeah, just literally started from a couple corners to a section to a lap to some sprint laps, and then motos. And he helped have some foundation and sort of a direction of where we were going, because I used to sometimes just ride aimlessly, just go do some laps, and then when I was bored I'd pull off.
Sure.
With him, everything had a purpose. And what was really cool is I went from not qualifying to then qualifying better, then scoring points, and then towards the end of the season I got 8th place at the French Grand Prix. And that had all happened in maybe 6 months.
Wow.
So all of a sudden it was like, yeah, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that 8th place at the French GP caught the attention of KTM, and they came with a pretty good offer. So I signed with KTM. 99 was my first year with them. The team was based in Holland, so I did the Dutch Championship and the Grand Prix.
Okay.
Broke my navicular, but was riding good. Kind of started out as a top 10 guy. The injury set me back a little bit, but then I came back to get my first podium. And then a couple of weeks later, my first win in Germany. I was able to kind of dominate that weekend. It was another one of those sandy-ish tracks that was right up my alley. And I got to be completely honest, my first Grand Prix win was maybe my easiest. It was
Mm.
still I was still pinching myself after the race, going, "I'm going to wake up from this. This just didn't happen." I didn't go
Yeah.
1-1, fastest in qualifying, fastest in every session, but it did. And I was like, but I busted my ass so hard 2 weeks ago and I got seventh and I gave it
Yep.
everything I had. And then today felt like it was just a natural, normal day. So by the end of 99, I then started believing that I could be a world champion. And then in 2000, I won the world championship, pretty much led almost from the beginning of the season, the whole year. And then during that year, I get a random phone call. Grant Langston? Yeah. It's Mitch Payton from Pro Circuit Kawasaki. I've been watching you. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Mitch Payton's watching me.
Yeah.
He's like, would you be interested in coming to race for me in America next year? And I said, hell yeah. And I almost signed with Mitch, but KTM had first right of refusal with me. And I stuck with KTM and came to the States.
And what year was it that you were sitting there on the side of the mountain and Everts comes up and talks to you to when you won the championship?
So 98 was when I was riding for Harry when I was at my lowest point.
Okay, 98.
And then 2.5 years later, I was world champion.
And no disrespect to your dad, but I think most moto dads are pretty hard on their kids, add the South African flair, which I've heard some really good things about, like you say, throwing the toys out of the box. How in the world did you, let's just pick an age, 15, 16 years old. That's a pretty volatile 2 years where you feel like you've got, on one hand, you're on top of the world because you're not in South Africa. You're literally living the dream. Like you said, when you had that spark that, hey, maybe one day I can make a living at this. That's clearly happening now, but yet you have no food money. You're getting bikes, but you have no food money. How does a 15-year-old with a pissed off dad on the other side of the world, away from your mom and your sister, how does if I've got a 15-year-old or a parent of a 15-year-old that's watching and listening to this podcast, where was your head? Where did you come up with these tools and resources? Give us some insight.
So there was a conversation in 98 when I was battling to qualify for the GPs. And I was in tears and I said to my dad, I thought this is what I wanted to do, but I just want to go home. I'll go back to school and do all that. And I remember he gets up in my face and he goes, we don't have a fucking home. I sold it to get you here because this is what you wanted and we're not giving up.
And you're how old? 15, 16?
Yeah, 15 years old. So I think if some other parents were standing there hearing that, they might have thought that was over the line.
Sure.
But I have to look back and go, I'm so thankful we were broke and didn't have a home to go to, because I was ready to give it up. I was so homesick. I had no friends. I had no interaction with people. We had no money. Like, it was tough, all different languages and cultures. It just, this is before social media and everything. So like, I felt very isolated. Like, we're on this little island and it wasn't a tropical island. It was a miserable.
Right.
And so I think there were two conversations in my early days of pro racing that really helped a lot. One was my dad saying, we're not giving up. We're not going back to South Africa. We're going to fight through this to the end. And Harry Everts saying that he believed in me. Those two things at the time didn't carry a lot of weight. You don't realize exactly what that means and what it does. But I can look back now and go, those were two of maybe the most important things that I needed to hear at the time that I was struggling the most. And I think from racing and that, and just the way my dad was, you don't show any signs of weakness. So, it was always, you're hurt, you act tough. And so I just always try to have a game face on. And then, at least by the time I won the world championship, I could afford a cell phone and a computer and a mountain bike and food and, start to enjoy life a little bit. And then obviously from there, when I moved to the States, that's when the real money started coming along.
So and you gave me goosebumps when those two examples, with Everts and then with your dad, kind of reminds me of the Vikings, right? The Vikings would get to their destination, they'd burn the ships because
they weren't going back.
exactly. We're going to eliminate all options. And I love those types of metaphors, if you will. At what point, and if again, you're not comfortable talking about anything, please just tell me to shut up and we can move on. But you're riding for Honda with Everts, no salary, get your bikes. And like you said, dad sold everything literally. From that time to when you finally got a contract where you literally could provide, let's say you were you were cash positive. You could feed yourself and your dad. Dad had some money that he could send home to mom and sister. From that time when you're sitting on the side of the hill and Everett said, you're going to do this, you'll figure it out. Approximately how long was that time wise?
In 99, when I rode for KTM, they had a decent bonus program, and I also was contracted to do the Dutch Championship. So I would, like I said, the first year when I was riding for Harry, I was really bad in the sand at the beginning, and we just rode a lot of sand being in Belgium and Holland, that I took it from one of my weaknesses to my strengths. So in 99, I won the Dutch Championship. So like those events, you could make 10 grand for a win.
Okay.
25 grand for the championship, so when you start winning those races and you're getting money from GPs, and then in Europe they have these invitational events where they pay you show up money. So I try to do anything that offered me money because I was tired of being poor. I got to be honest.
Sure.
I hate being poor. And so money was a big motivational factor for me, I would say, as well as being fast and trying to win. But I think it was when I went to KTM, that's when I started to, make money. I wasn't crushing it, but, we went from struggling to being comfortable,
Absolutely.
we were fine.
When did you get your first words of affirmation from your dad where he's like, hey, Grant, we're going to make it, man. You've made it. How old were you? Who were you riding for? And where were you at? Or have you never heard that from your dad? I've only met your dad once, and I don't expect him to remember me.
He's not very good at positive reinforcement. I never actually met my grandfather, his dad. He passed away when my mother was pregnant with me. But my mom said that, my dad's dad was, in her words, an asshole. And she's like, you never treated your father well. Your dad struggled to learn how to be a little nurturing or forgiving or loving. He always was just a hard ass. But with that said, my dad is very, he's done a lot of cool things himself, put himself through trade school and became, because my grandparents couldn't afford to send him to college. So he did an apprenticeship and went through trade school and became an aircraft technician. He funded his own racing. He used to work on other guys' bikes to make money to fund his racing. So, and now he's an incredible bike restorer. He's really into restoring vintage bikes, and he does fantastic work and very intelligent, very mechanically minded. So he has a lot of strengths in those areas, but coddling or being nice to me wasn't one of them back then. He's gotten a lot softer over the years and a lot more loving and just, I think he's learned to be a grandparent.
I was going to say, being a grandparent will change you pretty quick.
So me and my dad me and my whole family, we have a great relationship. We're all very tight. But I do remember at the end of 99 at the KTM, at the race shop where the team I was riding for, they did almost like a fantasy pool of who was going to do what in 2000. And I kind of thought that I had a chance of winning the world title, but I guess I was trying to not come across as cocky or arrogant. So when we picked the top 10 for the championship, I think I put myself like third or something like that. And my dad saw it. He's like, "Are you fucking kidding me? How are you going to win if you don't even believe it?" And he kind of was all mad at me about it. I'm like, okay. And I changed my picks, which I'm glad I did, because I made money off the whole race team by winning the fantasy league. And, but, I remember he was to me, that was a compliment, a backhanded compliment, basically saying, I believe you're going to win and you don't. If you don't believe you're going to win, you're not going to win.
True.
And so he basically told me, you've got to go to the line believing. He said, and he would always tell me, tell everyone your goals. Tell them my goal is to be world champion. He said, tell the media, tell the press. I said, yeah, but what if I don't? Then I look like an idiot or sound arrogant. And he goes, I was always told, if you tell people your dreams, because you don't want to come across arrogant or make a fool of yourself, he goes, you will do your damnedest to prove your predictions right. And I still think it was a kind of a good mindset to come in and go. And I told people, I don't think I don't know if anyone believed me actually, but I knew that my dad believed me. My uncle had come over at this point to be my mechanic, so my dad was kind of like the driver. He was making sure I did my training because Stephen Everts' training coach basically would take Stephen's training program, dumb it down slightly, and just send me a copy to help out. And so my dad was going to the grocery store and trying to make sure food was there, and driving through Europe, and trying to negotiate deals for me and races. So he was my guardian, my dad, still my coach, all of the above. So my uncle was my mechanic, and it was nice having my uncle there. He's a lot younger than my dad, so he's in between me and my dad's age. So he was like an older brother to me. So it was nice just to have another family member in my corner. And but I'll never forget when I won the world championship. It was at the second to last round. It was after the first moto, so I won the championship with 3 motos to go.
Wow.
And kind of reality was kicking in, and I remember coming across the finish line, and there was a supporters club that had come up to Finland to support, from Holland and Belgium, and that there was big banners and champagne, and I just remember seeing everyone, and it was like, wow, like this is happening. And I remember my dad and my uncle hugging me like from both sides, and they both just started bawling. And I was okay. I was stoked. And then all of a sudden, when they started crying, I got teary-eyed. But it was, I guess for me, the first time I'd seen this other side of my dad. Because when I say cried, it wasn't like he got teary-eyed. Like he was almost weeping, like bawling on my shoulder. And I'll never forget that moment because it was a little unexpected. But it just resonated like we did it. Like this dream from when I was a kid, we just did it.
I apologize. How old were you, Grant, at that time when you won that?
I just turned 18.
All right. So again, just to put reference back to at the age when you thought there's no way I'm going to be able to do this, to Everett saying you can do it. And then a couple of short years later, there you are, world champion. I've been fortunate enough to talk to some champions. I've heard people say on that last lap, it's like a movie that's in fast forward at 100x. You're thinking like a lot of things are crossing your mind. Obviously you're like having a lot of parent teacher conferences because you're like, oh my goodness, last lap. And you start to like you said, it starts to sink in a little bit. And then you cross that finish line. Had you ever seen your dad cry before that moment?
No.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Time. I'd never seen him be emotional. Well, only emotion I ever saw was anger. But because even in South Africa, when I would win, I'd be all stoked, and he would be like, "Hey, don't be cocky." I'm like, "What? I didn't even do anything." And I was never cocky, but he always thought I don't want the success to get to his head. So when I would win, he would almost sometimes like put me down and go, "Yeah, but you're just lucky that guy got a bad start, or when you move up, they're going to kick your ass. So humble yourself." So he always kept me grounded and almost nervous because I'm like, yeah, well, he's probably right. It's my dad.
How does that keep you? And I'm going to kind of throw today's snowflakes under the bus. I'm sorry, but I have to, because a lot of kids would be like, well, my dad's never satisfied. It's never good enough. And I'm sure that there's a time and a place that's probably appropriate. and maybe even accurate. But do you, based on what you're saying right there, do you think that that kept that fire in the belly going, or did you feel like you just were never good enough?
Well, I remember, you know, speaking of that kind of comment, or to address it, I was in, years prior to all of this, winning the world championship, when I was in South Africa, and I'd moved up to 80s, and I went from being the king on mini bikes to just an average guy in the 80 expert. And there was a race, and I got the whole shot, and I thought, finally, I got a good start. Like, now I can show what I'm worth. And I just had pressure from behind, and I got to be honest, I did ride like crap, and I went from first to fourth, and my dad was furious. And because I remember it was at the race where all the sponsors and the team were in Johannesburg, and we kind of got into it in the pits, and I was like, well, you know, and I think I had a couple excuses, and I said, but don't worry, I'm going to win the second moto. And he's like, you're crazy. He goes, you're lucky you got the whole shot. He goes, if you had to start in 10th, you would have finished 11th. He goes, because you're that freaking slow and you suck. And I'm like, I don't suck. I'm like, I'm better than that. And we were going at it. And he told me, you're not going to win because you suck. And I rode away to the start line all pissed off. And my dad looked over at our sponsor from Castrol and said, he's going to win this race, watch. And so I get to the line all mad, and I won the race. And I was like, see, I told you. And then there were a couple of people go, hey, just so you know, when you rode away, your dad said, watch, he's going to go win. So I started catching on to a little bit of his mind games, because I think he realized a pissed off Grant Langston was a fast Grant Langston.
Absolutely.
So he almost tried and antagonize me so that it would bring the best out of me. So, some of the things that he would say didn't really affect me like it may other kids if their dad said it. I almost became immune to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had family and friends and sponsors that would say things like, trust me, Grant, you're doing just fine. Like, your dad expects perfection. It's totally understandable, but his bark's bigger than his bite. Like, he's trying to just push you to your max. Sure. So to your snowflake comment, I think the way he raised me through racing helped me. Like, I see a lot of guys that buckle under pressure. Mm-hmm. I felt like the more the pressure got put on, the better I did. So I was used to pressure, and in a weird way, I kind of liked it, because it helped me really focus, I think would be the best way to put it, because it was like, all right, this is the goal, this is the job. And it was just like, almost like blinders on, ignore the noise and everyone else, and do your job. So I think that helped me a lot. But I think, on the flip side, learning from some mistakes over the years, one of the things was, especially when I came to America, I was always competitive and in the battles, but I had a lot of injuries. And sometimes I kind of wish that it didn't try to be fastest in first practice and fastest in time qualifying. You start realizing it only matters where you cross the finish line in the main event or that second moto when it's hot and rough and everyone's tired. So, to any of the kids out there, yes, we always want to be fastest. We want to win everything. We want to be the best. We want to win everything. But sometimes if you push 110% all the time, you're more likely to crash and have injuries. To me, I think there's a time and place for everything. Looking back on my career, I kind of wish someone would have said to me, hey, what you do in Saturday morning or before the night show or any of that doesn't really matter. You just have to be in the night show, or you just have to be in the motos. Once that happens, that's, when it's time to shine. But then again, you don't have to be always the fastest at every race or every lap. And, you know, it's that old saying, you don't have to win every battle. Your goal is to win the war. And
Absolutely.
I try to win too many little battles in my career, and I think it hurt me at times.
It's like when Cooper Webb gets asked, "Hey, why don't you really light it up during qualifying?" He says, "Because they don't pay for qualifying." And I think that sums it up right there.
He's the king of it. I mean,
Yep.
I gotta admire. You know, he just won his third Supercross championship, which put him in an elite category of which very few have done.
Yep.
And then you know, no disrespect to him, but I'm like, he wasn't the fastest guy.
He said the same thing.
But you know what? Who cares?
His salary doubled and that check didn't bounce.
And the record books will always say 2025 Supercross champ, Cooper Webb again.
That's right.
So, you know, to me, I think he's the epitome of you don't have to be a Jet Lawrence to still be able to win championships, you know, and
Yep.
the reality is, yeah, Jet got hurt, but that's not Webb's fault. That's
Yep.
right. Shit happens. It's happened to all of us.
Well, it's like the little asterisks everybody wants to put on Dungy because so and so wasn't in the race or this or that. But what's the old saying? You got to be in it to win it, and he was always in it, and the others weren't. That's all that matters. I have a question for you, and if it's an embarrassing question, again, please don't feel compelled to answer it. I always think you're in such a unique situation because, not to embarrass you, but let's face it, you represent such a very small percentage of people who have made not a living, but a very, very good living at racing motocross, right? If you look at the percentages of people who ride moto and get a chance to make a living at it, you talked about the word pressure. Did you feel more pressure not having a salary with the Castro Honda team, not knowing where your next meal is coming from, or keeping up with the success that you've already created? And now every win, I don't know what your win bonuses are. And again, it's none of our business, but we hear today that jets are 100, 150,000 a weekend. Which pressure did you find you enjoyed more? The, if we win, we get to eat, or if I keep this up, because I've heard differing opinions of this, and I'd be curious to get your opinion if you're comfortable talking about it.
Yeah, I have no problem talking about it. For me, the struggling and not having any money was definitely because there was a point in my career I'm like, I'm not going to be poor ever again. You know, it was I'm trying to think. You know, my parents are very frugal with money. I went from no money to when I started making money, I was paying for everyone's dinners, and
Sure.
I would consider myself a pretty generous person in that aspect. But I've always enjoyed it, being able to help or provide. Or I can't tell you how many times I've had people ask to borrow money from me, and that's always an awkward conversation because, you know, I think Kevin O'Leary said it one day: "Don't loan money to friends and family. Rather just make a donation and call it a write-off."
Yep.
And I've had to write off some money over the years, but you know, I'm not a very money hungry person. Like I've always said when I was younger, I wanted to be rich and famous because of racing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to a point where I'm like, I just want to be known as Grant, who was likable or approachable, was good to the fans or the kids and sponsors. Because, you know, I mean, I hate to say this, but when the money did start coming in fast and furious, you lose track of a dollar, like what it really represents. You know, you went from counting your change to see what can I buy to eat to you didn't even care where you went. You know, it could be the most expensive restaurant around, but it was like, yeah, that sounds like fun. And then, so I've had it on both sides of having no money and a lot of money. Now I say, you know, there's also that saying, more money, more problems. I like the situation I've put myself in, which is I own my own companies. I'm my own boss. I work with family. Most of my parents are involved. My sister's involved with both the dealership and the sandwich shop. My girlfriend's a manager at the sandwich shop. My daughter works there. So there's a lot of, crossover, but I like the fact that they say family businesses are very tough because of family. And through all our, ups and downs over the years, we've always had each other's backs at the end of the day.
Yep.
We might squabble once in a blue moon. Thankfully, it hasn't been much of that lately. I'd say it's been many, many years since there's been any sort of, issue amongst the family. So it's just nice to know that it's not just me that's okay, but most of my immediate family and family around are also doing, one, they're doing a job or a service, but that there's a certain amount of security for all of us.
Absolutely.
So, to me, I do believe that not having money can cause a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Having a lot of money can also cause a lot of problems. So I like being just comfortable and not having to stress about a mortgage payment or making your truck payment or whatever it is. So
Sure.
as long as that's the case, um, I just enjoy life. And it's nice if you can go on vacation when you want to, or buy a car if you want to. My goal when I was a kid, I said I want to be rich and famous. I said this about 6 years old, and someone said, "Well, what does that mean?" I said, "I'm going to be a world champion. I'm going to own a Ferrari." So the only thing I haven't purchased yet is a Ferrari, but I now that I get older, I'm like, well, that's not a very good investment. Maybe I should put in some stocks and, but I'm sure at one point I'm going to have to get a Ferrari just to kind of fulfill those
check that box.
childhood,
Yep. This is something I've always wanted to ask somebody of your caliber. Where is the most surprising place that somebody recognized you?
You mean like, oh, that's Grant Langston, or do you mean like just
like you say, being a rock star, right? You're rich and you're famous. And where's the most ironic place that somebody said, "Oh, that's Grant Langston, that world champion," or here in the States, the multi-time champion that you are?
There's been a couple times that kind of caught me off guard, almost like, oh wow, like that.
Yeah.
Kind of cool, especially when I haven't raced for many years. I'm not someone that was driven by I'm not someone that liked the limelight or the fame or being in front of people. I'm actually a bit of people often think I'm a very social person. I am, but only around a small tight group.
Mm-hmm.
It's still hard for me to walk onto a stage in front of a crowd. My heart's beating, my legs get weak. People are like, how'd you do TV? I said, I just was talking to Jason Wygand, and that's what I kept trying to tell myself. But even when they would do the opening, shot to start the day, I would tell Weege, the one day I put his hand on my heart and he goes, dude, I'm like, I get so nervous. I go, I hate being on camera. I'm like, I wish we could just sit in the booth and just start talking and not be on camera. So I do, I've never cared for being in the limelight. I think some guys are motivated and driven by that.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, I have had a few, I'm trying to think, there's been a couple of random ones, but I was in Mexico with my girlfriend on vacation, and she knew nothing about the sport. She's been told from other people, like, oh, he's kind of a big deal, and because she would ask these questions, and she's like, well, you don't act like it.
Yep.
And
there you go.
So we're in Mexico, and we're walking through the area where they sell local, jewelry and artwork and stuff. And there was this guy and his wife, and he keeps looking at me. And I'm like, why is this guy looking at me? And I'm like, you're doing the look around, like,
yeah.
And then I like make eye contact with him because it almost seemed a little weird.
Sure.
And then I look at him and he comes to me and he goes, hey, has anyone told you you look a lot like a guy that raced motocross called Grant Langston? I'm like, yeah, I've actually heard that a few times. And I go, because I am him. And the guy was like, no way. Oh my God, I never thought I'd run into someone like you in Mexico on vacation. I'm like, I thought the same thing. I didn't think I'd see a fan. Yeah. went to Maui
Yeah.
on a family trip, walked up to this swim up bar, and I'm like, damn, these Mai Tais are like $28. I'm like, what a ripoff. The guy next to me goes, are you Grant Langston? I'm like, yeah. No way. He's like, can I buy you a drink? I'm like, fuck yeah, with these guys, buy me drinks all day long, brother. And we just broed down at the bar there for about an hour. And he was
At
so,
$28 a piece.
yeah, he was so stoked. I mean, might not have been stoked when he saw his bill the next morning, but
Yeah.
It's happened sometimes really random when you least expect it. So,
I can only imagine.
yeah, it's happened on vacation a few times, which I thought was kind of odd because there's like no resemblance of motocross anywhere in the area, and all of a sudden it just takes one person.
Yep.
It's
That's
cool
awesome.
when I see people get kind of like, no, I don't. Everyone says the word starstruck, but when someone just gets pumped that they met someone that they've watched or looked up to,
Yep.
and then what makes me happy normally is when people go, man, you're a really cool guy. I'm
Yep.
so stoked to meet you. That to me means more than everything.
Well, and that's pretty scary because they say one of the most disappointing things is meeting your childhood star, or,
I've heard that, and I've actually experienced it myself. So yeah,
it's horrible, isn't it? It really is. And you've probably experienced it a little bit more intimately than you'd ever like to admit. And that sucks because at the end of the day, you're like, oh man, I wish I didn't have to go through that. You've had a tremendous amount of success over your career, obviously a lot of disappointment, like you say, injuries. If you could do your career over again, what would you do different?
I think some of the things that unfortunately you learn through trial and tribulations, right? Like I said to you, I wish I had the guidance to know when to push. I mean, I even literally suffered from burnout multiple times um, because I was trying to do too much and I didn't understand how the body worked. Um, and, I ended up in hospital uh, over it once before because I was never a lazy person. I always gave it everything. And I think because of how I was pushed and raised, I almost feel like I needed someone sometimes to tell me it's okay to back off a little bit. Um, you don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to win every race. If it's a track that you really struggle at, and you walk away with a third or a fourth or even a fifth, it's not the end of the world. But don't crash out trying to win because you're out of your league. I think things like you're always a badass if you come back way early from injuries. But I learned the hard way. Sometimes injuries breed more injuries. So you came back way sooner than the doctor said, but then that re-injuring it put you out way longer than if maybe you had spent a little more time off. So there's a balance with things. I think if you ask almost every racer that's raced, they have some things that they would do different. I've heard some guys say, "Man, I wish I'd given it everything I had," or you know, like I've heard guys say that they regret not putting in everything, and I can honestly say, that would never be a regret from my side. It was almost the other way around. I wish there was just someone to go, "Hey, that old saying, just pump the brakes a little bit, like."
Sure.
Let's reevaluate this, or the injury, or hey, you're physically burnt out, or you wore down, your injury's not really healed, or you're favoring that shoulder or that knee. So it's just, I think from where I came from and just the era, the like professional information and help wasn't really there, only later in my career. And when you start figuring those things out, as you start figuring out everything you did wrong or what you should change, you're done racing.
Yep.
And then then you start sounding like your dad, right? Let me tell you how it is, kid. You don't need this. You got to do that and do that. So definitely learned a lot. Through with I went through the school of hard knocks. And but it taught me how to believe in myself at times. It taught me how to overcome adversity. It taught me that, life can be tough at times. And it's those tough moments that make you a better, stronger, more professional person as you get older. So I think racing really helped me in the real world, because people go, oh, wait till you get to the real world. That's when you're really going to get your ass kicked. And I'm like, it's actually been relatively easy compared to all the other things. So, again, if things aren't going well, I get, like everyone, I get pissed off or a little moody. And now I learn just to take my mind off that, do something else, spend some time with family, go lay by the pool. I don't know, do something, get your mind off of it, reset, come back with the correct attitude, and then I've always worked through everything. So I think life and racing actually has a lot in common as far as that goes.
What would you say, how has your experience as a racer from the humble days all the way to the premier of, achieving all the big accomplishments that you have, how has that influenced raising your son and your daughter?
I think with my kids, probably because of the way I was raised, they think that I can be a little tough at times. But they're now at that age, when they get in those early teens, they think dad's just being a dick.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like they gravitated towards their mom more.
Okay.
Now that they're adults, we have a great relationship. And I think a lot of the things that I said to them then is starting to resonate now. So I would say I'm still the tougher parent because, I never wanted my kids to become spoiled brats because they've pretty much had everything they've ever wanted, and I'm sure they got tired of all my stories. When I was your age, we had
Sure.
nothing, you know,
Sure.
but now they get it, and, even the other day was my birthday last month. My daughter just said to me, it was her birthday literally a couple of days ago. And she said, thanks, you've taught me so much, you know, and I'm proud of my kids because they're both intelligent, they work hard, they have fun, they're responsible, they're good human beings, and that's all I ever wanted was to raise good human beings that are likable and can get along with people of all ages and demographic, and they do. My daughter's been at my sandwich shop for a year, and she's like arguably maybe the best employee we have.
You've had that shop a year already?
2 years.
Wow. I remember when you just acquired it,
Yeah,
literally.
it was 2 years ago in June 1st of 23.
That's insane.
And then my daughter graduated high school last year, so she went from school straight into the sandwich shop. And I said to her, "You don't have to come work for dad.
Sure. Sure.
Here's an opportunity. If you want to come,
Mm-hmm.
the place for you." I said, "But just keep in mind, I'm going to be hard on you." And I
Yeah,
said, one, because I want the best for you, and two, I don't want people to think, well, she's only here because it's the owner's daughter. I
that's
said,
right.
that's what employees will say. So I said, you've got to show them that you earned your right to be there. And she has. She shows up early, doesn't call out sick, puts in a hard day's work, like she's always keeping herself busy. And then it's that trickle effect because the other employees see, oh, everyone's doing stuff and keeping busy. And
Yeah,
it's,
that bar's set high. That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, I can tell you, being a fellow citizen, I want to say thank you for raising wonderful children because the world needs more of it, man. I know it's not easy always being your children's dad, but it's hard. And like you say, it's like when Kevin Hart was talking about, him and his wife went through a divorce and his kids were literally crying, calling him from the airport saying, we have to fly commercial. And he's like, I didn't realize that that's all they knew was private. He goes, it's not their fault that that's all they've known.
Yeah.
To your point, exactly. And yet you still have grounded children, self-disciplined, motivated. It's so thank you. You've done a great job. When you look at your career, and I apologize, did you choose to step away your career as a motocross racer, or did the circumstances and situations? I don't remember a significant career-ending injury for yourself.
It was
The
I
eye.
got diagnosed with a melanoma tumor in my left eye. And
Okay, because I remember the eye, but that wasn't, was that a shard of something got in there during a
no,
race?
was most people don't know this. I didn't either, but it's
Okay.
very rare. But everyone thinks of melanoma as skin cancer, but
Mm-hmm.
melanoma is anywhere that touches the sun or on the surface. So you can get melanoma obviously on your skin and
Okay.
eye. It's very rare, but yeah, I had a tumor developing in the eye, and it just caused a lot of issues, and the eye basically started separating from the inside out.
Okay.
And I tried to come back and race in 2010, and I was just never the same. And then I had multiple big crashes, hit my head really hard multiple times, and I wasn't ready to retire, but I was kind of forced to. In fact, my dad was the one that begged me to stop racing. He said, I'm worried that
Wow.
worse is going to happen. He goes, you're just not who you used to be. And I
Mm-hmm.
know it's hard for you to accept that, but he goes, your mother and I are concerned for your well-being now. And that
Wow.
was the guy who's pushed me my whole career, basically begging me to stop. So he was right. I wasn't in position to keep going. I I try to convince myself that I was fine and it was going to be okay. But all of a sudden I just started having these big crashes out of nowhere, and it just was uncharacteristic. And I knew that my vision just wasn't good enough at that level. And that was a tough one too, because like I said, I wasn't ready for retirement. So I hadn't even thought about, hey, what am I going to do when I wake up and I'm not a professional racer?
How old were you when you had to make that decision, Grant?
Um, 2008. So I was
Okay.
24.
Okay. Again, and I appreciate that because I do remember the eye was the,
Sorry, 20.
essentially the, pardon me.
Oh, wait. I'm born in 82.
No,
So
I'm with you. I have to get the calculator out, man.
in '08, I would have been, yeah, I was 25. Yeah, because I
Okay.
turned 6 that year. So yeah, 25. So
Because I remember
I,
reading that the,
I was in the, I was in a good position in my career. I just won the 450 outdoor title in '07, and
mm-hmm.
they used to have US Open, which then became the Monster Cup, and I won
Yep.
that. And I was starting to really gel with the Yamaha and the team, and I felt really good and confident coming into '08. And then as the season started, that's when the issue came about. So it was definitely very hard to accept. It just felt weird. Like, what do you mean? I'd go for physicals and I'd say, man, you are in such great shape. Like your health is incredible. Like, low heart rate, blood pressure way down. Like they were just like, your body fat is almost non-existent. So I was very, very healthy until that moment. They don't know what causes it.
It's not genetic in your family at all.
So in my family, there is a history of cancer on my
Okay.
mom's side and diabetes on my dad's side.
Okay.
So maybe coincidence, maybe just a freak deal. I don't know. They don't know much about it, but
And
yeah.
that's why I appreciate you clarifying because I remember hearing about the eye, but I thought it was something had gotten like, roost or something like that. I didn't realize. And again, obviously we weren't friends at the time. It wasn't like I could call you up. It, it was never really clear if it was like something had hurt the eye and then the eye became infected and then it started to have problems. I do remember hearing about it becoming a tumor. That's why I was like, well, wait, that would be more, you know,
Well,
like you say, no, no.
there were also a lot of rumors flying around because I had people saying things, saying to me like, "What hit your eye?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Cancer," but none. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot of yeah. People hear something and then we used to call it broken down telephone. As
Yep.
this gets passed along, it just slowly changes, and then someone comes to you and they're like, "This happened to you," and you're like, "What? When?"
Where were you at when it crossed your mind that you were going to close this chapter?
I was in an ambulance leaving Redbud on the way to the hospital, and I came to, and it was my father-in-law at the time, but he was my motorhome driver, my right-hand man. And
No worries at all. Just dial back in. It says that you're still muted, brother.
can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now. Just can't see you. There you are. Don't worry about it.
Sorry,
They
I
can
got
edit
a
it out. Yep, don't
phone
worry about it.
call.
So go ahead and just resume. You're in the ambulance, father-in-law, and they'll just clip it and attach it that way.
Bear with me 1 second. My phone was
No,
dying.
no worries, brother.
Does it matter if the phone's sideways?
Nope, sure doesn't.
Okay. Let me try this then. I had to put the charger on.
I totally understand. Yep.
Is that good?
Like I said, they can clip it. Everything will be perfectly fine. Just say you woke up after, I think you said leaving Redbud.
Yeah, I woke up in the ambulance. Obviously, I had a big crash, knocked myself out. I don't remember it. All I know is from afterwards, roughly where it happened. But I think it had been, like I said, a bit of a build up from multiple crashes that year and just not getting the results, not enjoying racing, I don't know, just frustrated and a little beat down. So I was in the ambulance. My father-in-law was with me because he was kind of my right-hand man at that time helping. And I'm like, where are we? And he's like, we're leaving Redbud. You had a crash. And I just said to him, I'm done. I said, I'm done. I said, I can't do this anymore.
And you're at the peak of your career, financially, sponsorships, everything.
I was not at the peak as far as results because in 2010, Yamaha had pulled out of racing. So they gave me support, but I was making money, but
yeah,
it wasn't at that point about the money.
No.
It was about racing, but
putting it in perspective.
Yeah, but besides the eye issue, yes, I was mid-20s, fit, strong, ready to go. But obviously with the eye issue, I just wasn't. And I think that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And that was enough for me to say, I'm done. And then I remember calling sponsors the following week and just apologizing. And they all said, hey, no need to apologize. We totally get it. And it's funny, I even said to sponsors, you don't have to pay me. Some sponsors paid me out my contract because they were like, hey, dude, you deserve it. We've already budgeted for it. We'll pay you out. Hey, maybe you could come do a signing for us here, do this or do that. I'm like, absolutely. Some people said, okay, cool. If you can't race, we can't pay you. I wasn't too worried about that. But I would be lying if I didn't say I was in a bit of a state of depression at that point. Not because I was broke, not because I had a crash. It was just the whole realm of racing was over, and then you wake up and you're like, who am I? What do I do today? Like, it was awkward because it happened like that as well. And thankfully, I already had the dealership in place and my parents were running it. So there was something for me to drop into and start learning about. But it took a little while to honestly go from being Grant Langston, the motocross racer, to Grant Langston, the normal everyday civilian overnight. That's why, I remember talking to numerous guys, but like even Ryan Dungey, technically he's my brother-in-law because my sister's married to his brother. And I said to Ryan, because he went through some of that where he was on top and he was making good money and he wasn't really that happy. And I remember having a conversation with him and I said, look, don't let other people influence you, because everyone's like, bro, you still got it. You can win. You should do it. I said, they're not really listening to you. That's just it's almost like they're living your dream through their eyes. And I said to him, you've got your health, you got your family, and you got plenty of money put away. You don't need to race. You got to do it from here because, that's when things can go sideways, is if you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And, I remember talking to Dean Wilson on a flight to one of the World Supercross rounds about just these things. We sat by each other and it was a long flight. So we just talked about all the little things. And I remember he was in a different situation saying, I still really enjoy racing and riding. And I said, then do it as long as you can.
Sure.
Go race all around the world. Go sightsee with your wife and your new son. I said, do it until you go, okay, I'm burnt out. I've had enough. I'm done. And I go, you can walk away with your head held up high. You'll have money in the bank. You'll have had great experience and you'll have your health, which for a lot of riders, that's one of the most important things when you're done is still being able to have the ability to move. And, a lot of guys have injuries where they've got no cartilage left or they have arthritis or they had this fused or even worse.
Sure.
We've all seen it. I mean, was my biggest fear was ending up in a wheelchair because I knew that would be a really tough one to overcome for me just because I've always been pretty active like most of us. That was kind of that fear in the back of my mind. So as much as the eye cancer put me out of racing and I was a little bit like I was down and borderline depressed, I had to remind myself of all the positives and, almost like stop being so self-centered, Grant. Like get over yourself, put your big boy pants on, start that next chapter in life, move on, do other things. And, and that ended up opening doors to doing TV announcing, ran a race team, did other, gigs, podcasts, all kinds of things. I was able to be opened up to a whole different sort of world besides just the racing. But racing built that platform to do everything else. So it's interesting.
One of the things, I'll use the word that you just used. One of the things that I find very interesting is the mother of invention is necessity. And when your dad leaned in and said, we don't have a house to go to because we sold it, right? The mother of invention, the necessity, your dad did what he had to do. And something like that, where the cancer essentially stole your career. How much did you lean back on those days where you're like, okay, well, it's not my choice. It's not what I'd prefer to do, but I've met this crossroad before. Can't go back home. Dad sold the house.
Yeah.
Right. How much of that experience did you, maybe it wasn't even conscious. Maybe you've thought about it since it's been a few years since that all went down. Did you ever kind of tap into some of those previous experiences that you referred to earlier with your dad in particular?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I did was after being kind of like pissed off at the world, when it felt like my career was ended prematurely, I had to sit there and just go, okay, well, it is what it is. I can feel sorry for myself and be miserable and bitch about it, or I can't change the fact that my vision is not what it needs to be. It's happened because then you start questioning, was it something I did? Was it something I used to take? Is it something I ate? Like why did this happen to me? Like I'm healthy. This is not right. Like all these emotions go through your mind. And I think a lot of people go through a lot of mixed emotions when anything happens in their life, whether it's ending their careers or quitting a job or maybe going through a divorce or anything like that, and many other things, losing a family member, whatever. I think there always comes a point where life gets tough and sometimes you feel like you get dealt a bad hand, but it's what do you make from that? And I really had to just remind myself that if there's someone that can get through it, it's me, because I've had the highs, I've had the lows, I've had everywhere in between. This feels like the end of the world in one aspect, but you know, I had to remind myself, like, you have some pretty good credentials in racing, you've got money in the bank, you got a business to fall back on. But I think it was just because I was still in the motocross racer mindset that that old saying, you got to let the dream go. I had to just let the dream go and realize, okay, life's moving on. And once I realized racing was not, or at least racing at the elite level was not an option, I was like, okay, what makes me tick? Like, what gets me out of bed? What do I want to do? And I started trying different things. I started coaching kids. I enjoyed that, but then it got a little monotonous for me. And you know how it is. Sometimes dealing with the parents can drive you nuts after a while. But it was cool to help some kids. I ran a race team for a year, almost 2 years. Then I got the opportunity to do some TV work, and that led to doing pro motocross, which even that felt like an honor, to get that opportunity. So yeah, I've just been able to take things that I learned through the racing world and kind of apply it into the real world. And that it's a lot of it is the mindset. It's your mindset of just believing. I know it sounds so corny and cliche, and we always say you got to believe in yourself. But if you put your mind to it, and you, without saying the right things, is only a fraction of it. It's actually doing those things, or doing the little things that's not in front of a camera that everyone sees. Like what you do in your downtime or spare time, or doing that little bit extra, or doing more research, or if guys are training that hard, you try to go to that level. Whatever it is, you try to do the little things that go unnoticed by the average eye, because then when people go, wow, how'd you improve so much, or what did you do, it's like, I know what I did. I put a plan of action in and I did the work.
Yep.
And there's no substitution for hard work. I mean, that's just the reality. Like, I worked so hard between trying to stay fit, get faster, recover from injuries, recover from burnout, that in the business world, it's different frustrations at times, but it's actually easier to deal with than at the racing level, because you're so passionate. In business, if something goes sideways, I'm like, well, that sucks. I mean, if it was my fault, I learn from it, I take accountability, and I try to correct it. But most of the issues that happen are not in my control. And I go, well, I can't control everything. It's not the end of the world. We'll just figure a way around this and we'll move on. And I think a lot of that mindset came from racing, failing, succeeding, and all the other things that you deal with.
When we had Jeremy Martin on the show, he talked about, he goes to Daytona on the 450 and he leads for all but 3 or 4 laps, and then has that unfortunate midair collision with Jay Coop, breaks his back, no offers. What was it like? Because you've been through 2 very, very difficult chapters in your life. You've gone through divorce, and like Roger Federer says, I say it in every show that we do here, Federer is on record as saying professional athletes die twice, once physically and the others when their career is over. You've gone through 2 very dark times. I went through a very tumultuous divorce that lasted 5 years, and you find out real quick who your friends are and who they're not. With the 2 big things that you've gone through, when that career was over, how many friends did you find out that you really had? If you were to put a number to it, who were your true friends during that transition?
So this one may surprise some people, but like I said, I had a lot of acquaintances and, people, and industry people, but I always had a pretty tight, small group. So I would say literally there was maybe one person that disappointed me. but I think that's because he wanted to be with my ex-wife. So
Gotcha.
He was the only one that kind of I did the interesting, but not much surprised me. And when with my divorce, I have to sit back and take some accountability because my divorce happened after my eye cancer and my career ended. But I also think I was maybe not the most pleasant husband to be around at the time because I was a little bit bitter, a little bit pissed off.
Sure.
So I am the first to say, I mean, the good thing is me and my ex-wife, we actually get along just fine these days. Like I would say, we're friends. She's remarried. Her husband's a nice guy, so he's a good stepdad to my children. So
Good.
they have two very good, stable households. My kids like their mom, obviously, their dad, but they like her husband. They like my girlfriend. So
Nice.
it's nice. My son actually works for Chelsea's husband, Eric.
Okay.
My son loves sports cars, and Eric's business is he sells luxury cars.
Okay.
So my son's there. I've gone to some of their when they do cars and coffee events. So again, it's like everything. Time heals. I know sometimes in a lot of divorces, after the divorce, no one really communicates or talks. So when I say we're friends, not like we really hang out, but we get along just fine. And
Sure.
we've always tried to do the best for the kids and work together as co-parents. So again, I don't entirely blame her. And, I think maybe if you asked her, I think she might say that she could have handled some things differently or been maybe a little more supportive when I needed it or whatever. But we were young. Racing was the kind of the glue that kept us. I mean, sometimes when you really look into it, a rider's wife is kind of like a babysitter for grown men. They do their laundry and their cooking and rub their feet at the end of the, and try to support them emotionally and all that. And then all of a sudden, when there is no racing, you now have to be just a normal couple that can really get along. So I don't have any hard feelings. I think that, we were young and in love and had this crazy life, and then things did change. And, again, I know even from some of my friends, they said, you weren't the most pleasant to be around. And I said, I get it. I'll own that. I said, I was a miserable bastard there for a little bit, but it's also because of just my personality, the passion, the drive, the frustration, all those things. So, but when I was able to get over it and, look at the next chapter, that's when things started going good, So again, it comes back to the mind is a very powerful thing. It's always easy to say, hey, stay positive and be upbeat. It's harder to really do it day in, day out, year after year. And as a racer, racing is like being on a roller coaster. You start off, it's all an uphill climb. And then when you get to the top, something happens and you free fall. And then you got the twist, the turns, the loops, the rush, the scariness of the unknown, all of that. So it really is. So now, like I said, coming back to just everyday living, I almost feel very fortunate to have had the life I have had, where I came from, everything I went through. I just feel like it's made me a very, I'm not trying to say like I'm this tough guy, but I think I'm mentally strong, that it would take a lot to really bring me down, in the future. Honestly, it'd probably be a family death would be the next time you'd see me being a little bit down and miserable. But the little things, I backed my truck up and hit a pipe that I didn't see. And I got out, and I was mad for a second, but I was more mad because I'm like, I hit my own truck into something I should have avoided. And then I got over it and I'm like, it's okay. I'll get it fixed. It's not a big deal. Like, why am I getting worked up over this? But I think it was more because I'm like, I'm better than this. I should not have
That's right.
hit it, you know?
That's right.
So I still have to coach myself through some of the stupidest things sometimes, but I'm always able to, like now, just laugh at myself and go, I'm an idiot, just like all of us at some time.
Well, and like you said earlier, you've got your whole family over here, all because of a racing career that spanned over 10 years. Think about what you've accomplished in 10 years. And you, like you say, you're able to contribute to your family directly and indirectly. And that in itself is just absolutely incredible. Um, Grant, I can't thank you enough for this. I always end the show with some rapid fire questions. Do you have the headspace to go through a few of them?
Let's do it.
All right. What are your 3 non-negotiables?
Oof. You said rapid fire. Now I got to think about this one. Non-negotiables.
Non-negotiables.
I will not. I will not just go with the flow because it's easiest and doesn't disrupt things. I'm very strong-minded and strong-willed, and if I believe in something, whether it pisses everyone off around me, and I might be wrong, but I will not waver because of, you know, peer pressure from whether it was a sponsor, COVID, any of these things. And what always makes me feel good is every time I've stood up or stood by what I believe, it's usually proven that I was right. It took time, so it makes me feel good when I put my head down at night to go, I'm not an idiot or just someone that's trying to be difficult. I believe in what I believe. And I'll be the first to say, if I don't have a strong opinion or know enough about something, I'm all ears. I'll listen. And then I'll try to take all the information and make it an educated decision that seems logical and normal. But I'm not very good at just going with the flow.
I love
You
it.
said 3. Oh, shit.
That's okay. That was a very powerful one.
Wow, non-negotiables. I'm not getting vaccinated. That's non-negotiable because that was proven to be a bunch of bullshit.
Yep.
Gosh, let me see if I can give you one more. Non-negotiables. I guess it's a little bit like the first one, but I don't think I'll ever change my DNA. I think if people were to listen to this podcast and then bumped into me and we had a beer at the bar or something, I think they would go, he's exactly what he portrayed. You know, I'm not a dick, even though I've been called a dick, but it's because sometimes people don't like when you don't agree with them. And I'm the first to say the world's made up of, 7 billion people. We all have opinions, just like we all have an asshole, right? So, but you gotta, if you believe in something, stay by it. I've had a conversation with people that they believe they were totally right, and I believe I was right, and I'm like, somebody's wrong, or maybe somewhere in the middle it makes sense, but but I try not to dismiss someone because they have a different opinion to me.
Amen.
When you travel the world, you meet a lot of people from different countries and cultures and backgrounds, and then the more you get to learn their upbringing or their background, the more you go, okay, that makes total sense why they feel that way or they look at it that way. So I try to just, be me, but also accept that not everyone's like me.
There you go. If you came with a warning label, what would it say?
Oh, shit. Oh, boy. Warning label. Yeah, it would be a pretty big warning label. It'd be a small book. My warning label would be this dog may bite.
I love it. That's classic. What advice would you give your younger self?
I think a little bit what I was trying to allude to earlier, which is you don't have to crush everything all the time, every time. One, it's virtually impossible. Two, puts unnecessary stress that maybe isn't needed. And thirdly, it can actually be the demise, instead of, if you're trying to be the best of everything, it's just not possible, right? You're good at what you do. I've been good at what I do, but, it's almost like stay in your lane. But so my advice would just be to be more methodical. I would say that I think there's that old saying, have a plan. And then my saying is, because it never goes accordingly. But the nice thing is when you have a plan, even when you're trying to be here and you're ping-ponging a little bit back and forth, you're staying close to that plan. And don't be afraid to make adjustments as things go along. Everyone's like, I want to do this by this age. Well, maybe it happened a year earlier, maybe it happened a year late. Maybe you didn't quite get there. But as long as you have a plan, it gives you direction and something to focus on. And then you look back and you go, well, it didn't go exactly the plan, but thankfully it went really close. And I'm satisfied because I had a drive, I had a goal, I had a direction, and we got there.
I love what you just said, because if somebody's listening, that would be the advice they would be receiving from you. What's the best advice you've ever received, and from who?
Best advice I've ever received, and from who? Best advice. It's probably another little bit of a corny one, but just basically be you, be true to yourself. We're all born and we're all, got different goals, different drive, different backgrounds, different genetics. I'm sure there's a bunch of kids that you work with that are like, man, I wish I could ride like Jet Lawrence. Well, you're probably not, but it doesn't mean you can't be a champion.
Mm-hmm.
I can show them videos of Ricky Carmichael, maybe not the most orthodox. James Stewart just had a crazy way of doing it. He always reminds me of Tiger Woods, just
Yep.
looked at tracks just like Tiger looked at golf courses and did it different.
Yep.
And it was aggressive, and it was, Tiger was hunting flags where other guys were looking for safe landing spots for a nice up and down putt. He was trying to drain them from wherever he was. James had that. Everts was very methodical and standing. McGrath just had this ahead of his time technique, and everyone's done it different. Like if I watch old footage of myself, I'm like, oh, I look terrible. Oh, it's embarrassing. I'm like, I look like a goon. And a lot of guys feel that way, but there's not one way to be successful. There's so many different ways, and the same is with racing. Take your strengths and embrace them. Take your weakness and try to work on it. Be open-minded. And maybe some of your kids might want to hear this. I've dealt with it when just trying to do some riding coaching, especially with like younger, newer kids. They tend to sit down, their legs are flailing, this and that. And I go, hey, we're going to start. I don't want you to go fast, but I just want you to stand the entire way around the track, grip the bike with your knees, use your feet, and stand through the ruts and all that. It sucks. I don't like it. I can't ride like this. And I'm like, you did half a lap. That's not trying it. That means you literally went out and went, it doesn't feel good. I don't want to do this. No. Go and do what I said. Go do 3 laps standing up. My back hurts. I'm like, well, that's good, because they just told me your back muscles are weak. So we've got to strengthen those. But then all of a sudden, standing deep into a turn or through, choppy ruts or whatever it may be, doesn't feel as awkward. And so even if something feels a little foreign in the very beginning, doesn't mean give up on it. Mm-hmm. Give it a fair chance. Work on it. Don't go, I don't like it, or it doesn't feel natural. You got to work through it. And I had to learn that too. I used to come in, I don't like this. It doesn't feel right. People would be like, I don't care. Like, you need to. So don't give up on things that just because it doesn't feel natural or easy or the way you would do it. Because if you can take your weakness and, even if you don't turn it into a strength, but just it's not your weakness. Now you got your strengths, no weakness. You're a better athlete all around right there.
Couldn't agree more. What was the last song you listened to?
Oh, I feel like because my girlfriend loves country, I feel like Morgan Wallen is stuck in my head.
Okay.
She plays the same 20 freaking songs non-stop. So it would just be Morgan Wallen, not even a song, because I've heard the whole album every day for about a year now.
I love it. Last question for you. What's your favorite dessert?
Well, it's really hard to narrow it down, but I am a sucker for a good creme brulee.
Amen to that. Yes.
I love creme brulee.
Michaela,
and many other things, unfortunately. Yeah. But creme brulee, if you got a good creme brulee, you've got my attention.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to beat that one. I have to agree with you that 100%. Well, Grant, I can't thank you enough. I mean, this is called Meet the Guest, Next Chapter. You just alluded to it here just a little bit ago. And it just, the fans, they love you. I know that they're going to garner a lot of information to get, and that's the whole intention of the podcast is help people understand, how do we know Grant? Well, we know him, the guy on the cover of the magazines. We know him, the guy that's on the TV. But for you to share kind of the trials and tribulations, I know I've learned a lot here today, and I really appreciate you putting this together. So I'll leave the last comment to yourself. Anything you want to leave with?
Yeah, just adding a little bit to some of the things you said, which is, and I've mentioned it as well. You deal with a lot of up and coming, inspired kids, and I'm sure some of their parents are trying to gain knowledge. And it's just, like I said, there's a goal, which the end goal is to be a champion, or, maybe for some people, it's not even to be a champion, just to be a better rider or a safer rider, or be better at their local, club race or whatever. Everyone's got a goal or a drive, but like I was trying to say, there are different ways. I feel like saying you got to start in a destination. It's kind of like road tripping from California to New York. The quickest way is probably going to be on the freeway the whole way, but it doesn't mean that's the only way to get there. And what I'm trying to say is, you can take your individuality, your strengths, your weaknesses, and try to put things together to just be the best version of you. Not everyone can be Jet Lawrence or, Ricky Carmichael. I mean, even for me, I watch these guys and I get in awe and inspired, and just be like, I'd be lying if I didn't say there's a part of me that goes, man, I wish I could have done that. Sure. But I am glad that I tried my hardest. I made a lot of mistakes, but I not intentionally, I had to learn from those. But so for a lot of these kids coming up, don't let a bad race beat you down too hard. Instead of focusing on what went wrong, think about what went wrong, and then figure out, how do I try to prevent that from happening again? Mm-hmm. And that's when you start making actual gains in your life and career, is by taking those moments. Don't just dismiss it. Like, look at it. What happened? Hey, was it my fault? Okay, whatever. But hey, if it was my fault, how do I try to prevent this from happening? Like, instead of feeling sorry for yourself or being down or pissy, or if that didn't happen, I would have done this. No, now go correct it. Find a way to correct it, and then make yourself, again, a better athlete, a better human, a better racer, whatever it may be.
I love it. Grant, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of all you listeners, thank you for supporting the podcast. We greatly appreciate it. And we will catch up with you next month. Be safe.
Thanks, Rob. Take care, everyone.
Meet the Guest, Next Chapter, part of the Coach Robb Podcast Network.